Ever since the invention of online multiplayer, game developers have struggled with how to handle the customary single-player mode. For some games, the solution is to create a short campaign that, if we're being completely honest, most of the fan base completely ignores. Unfortunately, that's often the best-case scenario, as many online-focused games will do little more than repurpose the multiplayer stages and add bots. On first inspection, that seems to be the case with Planet 2000, a brand new PlayStation 4 title from Defunct Games. It's a fast-paced car combat game where the goal is to take land and destroy the other team's base. It has the type of single-player mode you would expect from an online-focused game, the kind where the so-called campaign is nothing more than an afterthought. But here's the thing, this isn't an online game. In fact, it doesn't even support anything beyond two-player split screen, and that's hardly the worst thing about Planet 2000. This is a surprisingly easy game to describe, since every level plays out exactly the same way. As I already mentioned, the mission is to destroy the opponent's base. You do this by seizing land and building computer-controlled drones. Of course, your opponent's doing the same thing, so the battle always comes down to a fight over a few centrally located bases. Once you have enough land, you can start lobbing missiles at the base and blow it up into a million little pieces. Instead of being just another first-person shooter, Planet 2000 has you tearing up the incredibly flat landscape with a couple different hover vehicles. You start out with a speedy craft that has a built-in turbo boost and can quickly race between outposts. However, you'll want to take the slower, more powerful tank into battle. The slow-moving craft trades turbo boost for a force field, which makes it a formidable foe on the battlefield. Although painfully simplistic, this is a solid foundation for an online multiplayer action game. I mean, we've seen a lot of these concepts before, but never underestimate the amount of fun you can have while playing with a bunch of friends. Except none of that fun is anywhere to be found in Planet 2000, where every mission feels like a lonely exercise in repetition. The large levels that should be filled with human players are all lifeless and dull. You'll spend way too much time just driving to each location after you die, knowing that all this busy work is adding minutes to the clock. It's not so much that the mechanics in Planet 2000 are bad, but rather that there's a general sense of sameness and monotony to every stage, and that going up against predictable computer opponents isn't all that compelling. It doesn't help that the hovercrafts aren't much fun to drive. I went in expecting them to float around the stage like a Covenant ghost in Halo, but they handle more like Jill Valentine in Resident Evil. We zip around the screen using sluggish tank controls, which is only made worse by the inadequate strafe buttons. Even if you're piloting the faster craft, it's still impossible to escape the enemy fire, and it becomes more about grabbing power-ups and hoping for the best. It's almost as if these vehicles weren't designed with combat in mind. Ironically, one of the best parts of Planet 2000 is also its worst. Instead of giving us the typical wall of text, Defunct Games went one step farther by including full-motion video sequences before every stage. Of course, when I say full-motion video scenes, I actually mean that it's just footage of actors standing in front of an unconvincing green screen. And when I say actors, I actually mean a cast made up entirely of adult film stars. Look, I have nothing against porn actors wanting to make the leap to video games. In fact, there's already some great examples of this working out. But part of casting is giving us actors that not just look the part, but also act the part. And there isn't a single moment where I believe these three women are the top soldiers in an outer space war. And it's not just the tongue rings and the stripper nails, but how they spend the entire time looking away from the camera as they read cue cards. It's bad. What I will say is that at least these full-motion video cinemas are occasionally funny, even though that's not what they were going for. The rest of the game is kind of a slog, where you end up doing the same thing from one map to the next and waiting for the computer opponent to step up their game. It also doesn't look especially sharp, with wildly outdated visuals and boring backgrounds. But even if it had Oscar-winning actors, mind-blowing graphics, and great gameplay, Planet 2000 would still be a single-player action game trying to mimic online shooters. Without proper multiplayer, there's almost no point in playing this game. The computer opponent is weak, the story isn't especially riveting, and every mission plays out exactly the same way. And that's on top of so many other issues. If this is what we have to look forward to in space, then I'm better off just sticking to planet Earth. Hey, thanks for watching our review. We're halfway through January, which means we're finally getting into some 2017 games. I'm going to follow this up with a review of Silvio and Xenoraid, along with a look at Blossom Tales and Spirit Sphere. In other news, I recently pieced together a rough version of our trivia game show. I have 2 episodes recorded, and everything's set to debut on February 1st. I know it's still a couple weeks off, but I recommend you click the subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.